You know, some people really should learn to mind their own business. But Karen Whitfield? She made it her life's mission to stick her nose where it didn't belong. And on that humid July evening at Sunset Lake, she picked the absolute worst possible target. My name's Agent Sarah Chun, and I've been with the FBI for 12 years. White-collar crime, financial fraud, public corruption, the kind of cases that require patience, precision, and a lot of very quiet surveillance work. Which is exactly what my team was doing at the lake cabin that weekend. See, we've been tracking a money laundering operation for 8 months. The kind where dirty cash gets cleaned through fake real estate deals, shell companies, and corrupt local officials who look the other way for the right price. Our investigation had led us to Sunset Lake, specifically to the cabin community's HOA board and their suspiciously expensive improvement projects. The cabin we'd rented sat right across the water from the HOA president's place. Perfect vantage point for our surveillance equipment. We had telephoto cameras, directional microphones, and enough recording gear to fill a small van. All legal, all properly warranted, all very, very quiet. Or so we thought. It was around 8 p.m. when Karen came marching down the dock like she owned the entire lake. Which, knowing what I know now, she probably thought she did. She was maybe 55, with that particular brand of entitlement that comes from never being told no in her adult life. Blonde highlights, designer sunglasses despite the setting sun, and a phone already pressed to her ear. "Yes, I want to report a disturbance," she said loud enough for half the lake to hear. "There's some kind of business meeting happening at 47 Lakeview Drive. Multiple cars, people with equipment, very suspicious activity." I was inside the cabin, monitoring our audio feed from across the water, when Agent Rodriguez nudged me. "Boss, we've got company." Through the window, I watched Karen pace the dock, gesticulating wildly as she spoke to what I assumed was the local sheriff's office. My team, 4 agents total, had been careful to keep a low profile. We'd arrived in separate, unmarked vehicles. Our equipment was hidden. We weren't even playing music. But Karen had decided we were up to something, and by God, she was going to put a stop to it. "They've got cameras pointed at the water," she continued, her voice carrying across the lake like a foghorn. "And there are at least 6 people inside. This is clearly some kind of commercial operation in a residential zone. I demand you send someone immediately." Agent Martinez, our tech specialist, looked up from his laptop. "Should we pack up?" I shook my head. We'd been planning this surveillance for weeks. The HOA board meeting was tomorrow morning, and we needed to document who showed up, what was discussed, and most importantly, where the money was really going. Some busybody neighbor wasn't going to derail 8 months of investigation. "Let her call," I said. "We'll handle whatever comes." Famous last words. Tell me where you're watching from. And has anything like this happened in your city or state? 20 minutes later, 2 deputies from the county sheriff's office pulled into our driveway. I recognized the older one, Deputy Mills, 30-year veteran, the kind of cop who'd seen everything twice. The younger one looked fresh out of the academy. I met them at the door, badge ready but not immediately visible. "Evening, folks," Deputy Mills said, tipping his hat. "We got a complaint about some kind of disturbance. Mind if we have a quick word?" "Of course, Deputy. I'm Agent Chun, FBI. I showed my credentials. My team and I are conducting authorized surveillance as part of an ongoing federal investigation." Mills examined my badge carefully, then looked back toward the lake where Karen was still visible on her dock, probably watching us through binoculars. "Federal investigation, huh?" He handed back my ID. "Anything we should know about?" "Public corruption, money laundering. We have all the proper warrants and notifications filed with your department. Should be in your system under case number FB 2023-4471. The younger deputy was already on his radio, checking. After a moment, he nodded to Mills. "It's legit, sir. Federal task force, authorized surveillance operation." Mills sighed and looked back toward Karen's dock. "Well, this is awkward. Mrs. Whitfield over there is persistent. She's going to want to know why we're not shutting you down." "That's between you and Mrs. Whitfield," I said. "But deputy, you might want to know. She's actually part of our investigation." Both officers' eyebrows shot up. Mills leaned closer. "Come again." The HOA board she sits on. We have evidence they've been laundering money through fraudulent construction contracts. Tomorrow's board meeting is when we expect them to approve the next round of fake invoices. Mills was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Then he looked back at Karen, who was now walking toward our cabin with the determined stride of someone about to make everyone's day much more complicated. "Agent Chun," Mills said quietly, "I think your investigation just got a lot more interesting." And that's when Karen Whitfield made the mistake that would unravel everything she'd spent years building. She decided to take matters into her own hands. But first, she was going to try to get us arrested for doing our jobs. Little did she know, she was about to hand us the best evidence we could have asked for, and it was all going to be recorded. The real show was about to begin. Karen strode up our driveway like a general inspecting troops, her designer sandals clicking against the asphalt with military precision. Behind her trailed two more people I didn't recognize, a thin man in an expensive polo shirt and a woman with a clipboard who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. "Officers," Karen called out, still 20 feet away. "I hope you're here to shut down this illegal operation." Deputy Mills turned to face her, his expression carefully neutral. "Mrs. Whitfield, we've spoken with these folks. Everything appears to be in order." Karen stopped dead in her tracks. "In order?" "In order." Her voice pitched up about 3 octaves. "They have commercial surveillance equipment pointed at private residences. They're clearly running some kind of spy operation." I had to give her credit. She wasn't entirely wrong. We were running a spy operation, just not the kind she thought. "Ma'am," the younger deputy said, "these are federal agents conducting authorized." "Federal agents?" Karen's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "Oh, please. Look at them. They're probably private investigators hired by someone's ex-husband. Or worse, corporate spies trying to steal our community development plans." The thin man behind her nodded eagerly. "Karen's right, officers. I'm Brad Hendricks, HOA treasurer. We've invested significant resources in our community improvement initiatives. If competitors are trying to steal our proprietary information..." I almost choked. Proprietary information? Their community improvement initiatives consisted of paying Brad's brother-in-law's construction company 3 times market rate to install a boat dock that should have cost $20,000, not $60. Agent Rodriguez stepped up beside me. "Mrs. Whitfield, Mr. Hendricks, I assure you we're not interested in your improvement initiatives." "Then what are you interested in?" Karen demanded, hands on her hips. Rodriguez smiled. It wasn't a particularly friendly smile. "We're interested in financial crimes, money laundering, public corruption, that sort of thing." The color drained from Brad's face so fast I thought he might pass out. Karen, however, seemed to take this as a personal challenge. "Well, then you're wasting your time here," she said. "Our HOA operates with complete transparency and integrity. I've been on this board for 8 years, and every penny is accounted for." "I'm sure it is," I said. And technically, she was probably right. Every penny was accounted for, in fraudulent invoices, kickback payments, and shell company transfers that we've been tracking for months. "Ma'am," Deputy Mills interjected, "perhaps we should." "No," Karen cut him off. "I want to see their warrant. If they're really federal agents, they'll have paperwork, official documentation. I know my rights." She was right about that too. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the digital copies of our surveillance authorizations. "Here you go, Mrs. Whitfield. Federal warrant, signed by Judge Martinez, authorizing surveillance of suspected money laundering activities in the Sunset Lake community." Karen snatched my phone and squinted at the screen. Brad leaned over her shoulder, both of them reading intently. I watched their expressions change as they processed what they were seeing. This says you're investigating the HOA board," Karen said slowly. "Among other things, yes. But that's impossible. We haven't done anything wrong." The woman with the clipboard, who I now realized was probably the HOA secretary, took a step backward. "Smart woman. Mrs. Whitfield," I said, keeping my voice professional. "We're not here to discuss our investigation with potential subjects. We're simply conducting authorized surveillance." "Potential subjects?" Karen's voice cracked. "Are you saying I'm a suspect?" That's when Brad made his first critical error. Instead of suggesting they call a lawyer or simply walking away, he decided to go on the offensive. "This is harassment," he said, pulling out his own phone. "I'm calling our attorney, and the mayor, and the state attorney general's office. You can't just set up spy equipment and terrorize law-abiding citizens." "Mr. Hendricks," Agent Martinez said quietly, "you might want to reconsider that approach." But Brad was already dialing. "Hello, this is Brad Hendricks, treasurer of the Sunset Lake HOA. I need to speak with Attorney Morrison immediately. We have federal agents harassing our community." While Brad ranted into his phone, Karen was studying our surveillance warrant with the intensity of someone trying to decode nuclear launch codes. I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out how much we actually knew. "This warrant is very specific," she said finally. "Shell companies, fraudulent invoices, construction contracts." "Yes, it is. But surely you don't think our little community HOA is involved in anything like that?" I looked across the lake toward the massive boat dock that had supposedly cost $60,000 to install. Then at the emergency drainage system that had somehow required $40,000 in consulting fees. Then at the security upgrades that consisted of 2 cameras and a gate that cost more than most people's cars. "Mrs. Whitfield," I said, "let me ask you something. In your 8 years on the HOA board, have you ever wondered why your improvement projects cost so much more than similar work in other communities?" Her face flushed red. "Our contractors provide premium services. You get what you pay for." "I'm sure you do." Brad finished his phone call and turned back to us, looking smug. "Attorney Morrison will be here within the hour, and he's bringing documentation that will shut down this fishing expedition permanently." Agent Rodriguez and I exchanged glances. Morrison was definitely on our list of people to investigate. If he was coming here personally, that was interesting. "In the meantime," Karen said, "I'm calling an emergency HOA board meeting tonight. We need to discuss this security breach and decide how to protect our community from this kind of intrusion." "That's your right," I said. "But Mrs. Whitfield, you should know that any meetings held tonight will be subject to our surveillance authorization." Her eyes widened. "You're going to spy on our emergency meeting?" "We're going to monitor activities related to our investigation, yes." That's when Karen made her second critical error. Instead of keeping her mouth shut and calling a lawyer, she decided to issue a threat. "Well, Agent Chun," she said, emphasizing my name like it was a curse word, "I hope you and your team are prepared for what's coming. Because by tomorrow morning, this entire operation is going to be shut down, and you're all going to be looking for new jobs." The 2 deputies shifted uncomfortably. Deputy Mills cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitfield, maybe we should." "No, Deputy. These people have made a serious mistake. They think they can come into our community and intimidate honest citizens. But they picked the wrong neighborhood. And they definitely picked the wrong HOA president." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because what Karen didn't know was that her emergency HOA meeting was exactly what we'd been hoping for. Nothing makes criminals panic quite like federal surveillance, and panicked criminals make mistakes. Big, recorded, prosecutable mistakes. "Mrs. Whitfield," I said, "you're absolutely right. We definitely picked the wrong HOA president." She smiled triumphantly, completely missing the irony. "Good luck with your meeting tonight," I added. "We'll be listening." And that's when I saw it. The first flash of real fear in her eyes. Because somewhere in that entitled, indignant brain of hers, a little voice was starting to whisper that maybe, just maybe, she'd bitten off more than she could chew. But it was too late to back down now. Karen had declared war on the FBI. This was going to be fun. By 9 p.m., cars were pulling into driveways all around the lake like it was Christmas morning. Karen had managed to summon the entire HOA board, plus what looked like half the community, for her emergency security meeting. From our cabin, we had a perfect view of the community center, a fancy name for what was basically a glorified shed with folding chairs and a coffee machine. But tonight, it was lit up like a Broadway theater, with people streaming and carrying notebooks, phones, and the kind of grim determination usually reserved for declaring war. "Audio check," Agent Martinez said, adjusting our directional microphones. We're getting clear reception from inside the building. Visual. Thermal imaging confirms 23 people inside. Telephoto cameras have clear sight lines through the windows. I settled back in my chair with a cup of coffee. After 8 months of investigation, we were finally going to hear these people talk openly about their operation. Nothing loosens tongues quite like panic. Ladies and gentlemen, Karen's voice came through our speakers crystal clear. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. We have a serious situation that requires immediate action. Murmurs of agreement from the crowd. I recognized most of the voices from our previous surveillance. Brad Hendricks, the treasurer, Susan Walsh, the secretary, Mike Romano, the maintenance coordinator, and about 20 homeowners who probably had no idea they were about to become accessories to obstruction of justice. As most of you know, Karen continued, federal agents have set up surveillance equipment directly across from our community. They claim to be investigating financial crimes, but we all know this is really about intimidation and harassment. More murmurs, these ones angrier. Now, I've spoken with our attorney, and he assures me that what they're doing is legally questionable at best. We have rights as private citizens, and we're not going to let some overzealous government agents trample all over them. Applause. Actual applause. I had to admire her ability to work a crowd. Agent Rodriguez leaned over. She's good. Wrong, but good. The question is, Karen said, what are we going to do about it? That's when Brad Hendricks spoke up, and I knew we were about to hit the jackpot. Karen's right, he said, but we need to be smart about this. If they're really investigating financial crimes, we need to make sure all our documentation is organized. The room went quiet. Even through our audio equipment, I could feel the tension. What do you mean, organized? Someone asked. I mean, Brad said slowly, we need to review our recent contracts and invoices. Make sure everything is properly documented and consistent. Susan Walsh, the secretary, cleared her throat. Brad, are you suggesting we need to revise our records? And there it was. The magic words that turn a financial investigation into a federal conspiracy case. I'm not suggesting anything illegal, Brad said quickly. I'm just saying we need to present our financial records in the best possible light. If there are any discrepancies or unclear documentation, now would be the time to clarify them. Discrepancies like what? This from Mike Romano, who I knew had been getting kickbacks from the construction contracts. Well, Brad said, and I could hear him shuffling papers. For example, the Lake Dock project. The final invoice was significantly higher than the original estimate. If investigators don't understand the additional work that was required. You mean the work your brother-in-law charged us extra for? Someone called out from the back of the room. The room erupted. Multiple people started talking at once. Voices overlapping in a chaos of accusations and denials. That's enough, Karen shouted. This is exactly what they want. They want us fighting among ourselves. But Karen, Susan said, if there really are problems with our contracts. There are no problems. Karen snapped. Our contractors have provided excellent service at fair market rates. Fair market rates. This from an older man I didn't recognize. Karen, that boat dock cost 3 times what my neighbor paid for the same work last year. Mr. Peterson, Karen said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. You don't understand the complexities of waterfront construction. There were environmental considerations, permit fees. Permit fees that went straight to your husband's consulting company. Peterson shot back. The room exploded again. Through our audio feed, it sounded like a riot was breaking out. I grabbed my headphones and turned up the volume, not wanting to miss a single word. Order. Order. Karen was shouting over the chaos. This is exactly what the feds want. They're probably listening to every word right now. Actually, we were recording every word. There's a difference. Agent Martinez looked up from his equipment with a grin. Boss, we just got enough admissions to justify expanding our warrant to include the entire board. But the best was yet to come. Because that's when Attorney Morrison arrived. I heard his voice before I saw him. A booming baritone that cut through the arguing like a knife through butter. What the hell is going on here? Morrison demanded as he burst through the community center doors. The room went dead silent. Through our telephoto lens, I could see Morrison clearly, mid-50s, expensive suit, the kind of lawyer who charges $500 an hour and thinks he's worth twice that. Jim, thank God you're here, Karen said. These federal agents are conducting a legally authorized investigation. Morrison cut her off. Which you idiots are making worse by holding this circus. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Jim, Brad said carefully, we were just discussing how to organize our documentation. Stop talking, Morrison roared. All of you, don't say another goddamn word. But it was too late. Way too late. Mr. Morrison, Susan Walsh said, we need to know if our records are going to be a problem. Because some of the invoices from Romano Construction. I said stop talking. Agent Rodriguez was practically bouncing in his chair. They're destroying themselves, he whispered. This is better than Christmas. Morrison was pacing now, his voice carrying clearly through our microphones. Listen to me very carefully. If federal agents are investigating this HOA, it means they already have evidence. Real evidence. Bank records, email communications, financial transactions. This meeting is being recorded right now, and every word you say is going to be used against you in court. The silence that followed was so complete, I thought our audio equipment had malfunctioned. Then Karen spoke, and I knew she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. Jim, you're overreacting. Yes, we've been creative with our funding sources, but everything we've done has been for the good of the community. If we need to, adjust some documentation to better reflect our intentions. Karen, shut up. But Karen was on a roll now. 8 years of unchallenged authority, making her believe she was untouchable. No, Jim. I'm tired of being intimidated. So what if we inflated some invoices? So what if we got kickbacks from contractors? Every HOA in the state does the same thing. The only difference is we got caught. The silence that followed was deafening. Agent Martinez was frantically checking his recording equipment. Please tell me we got that, he whispered. Every word, I confirmed. Through our cameras, I could see Morrison standing frozen in the middle of the room, his face white as a sheet. Several board members were staring at Karen like she'd just confessed to murder. Which, legally speaking, she kind of had. Karen, Morrison said quietly, do you realize what you just said? I said we've been doing what everyone else does. We've been taking care of our community and our families. And I'm not going to apologize for it. That's when Brad made his own fatal error. She's right, he said, standing up. Yeah, we skimmed money from construction contracts. Yeah, we created fake invoices and shell companies. But we used that money to improve our community. The landscaping, the security system, the boat dock. All of that came from our creative financing. And our bonuses, Mike Romano added helpfully. Don't forget our bonuses. Morrison looked like he was having a heart attack. You people are insane, he whispered. But Karen wasn't done. Not even close. Jim, I want you to file injunctions against these federal agents. I want them removed from our community immediately. And then I want you to sue them for harassment and invasion of privacy. Karen, I don't care what it costs. We have resources. We have connections. My husband knows people in the state attorney general's office. We are not going to be pushed around by some federal task force. Agent Rodriguez looked at me with raised eyebrows. Her husband knows people in the AG's office. I nodded grimly. That was news to us, and it explained how they'd been operating so openly for so long. But it also meant our investigation was about to get a lot bigger. Furthermore, Karen continued, I'm calling for a vote of no confidence in these federal agents. As elected representatives of this community, we have the authority to reject their presence here. The room was dead silent. Even the people who'd been supporting Karen seemed to realize she'd lost her mind. Morrison gathered his papers and headed for the door. I'm withdrawing as counsel for this HOA, effective immediately. Anyone who wants legal representation should find their own attorney, preferably one who specializes in federal criminal defense. Jim, you can't abandon us. Karen called after him. Morrison paused at the door and turned back. Karen, you just confessed to multiple federal felonies in front of 20 witnesses while being recorded by federal agents. I'm not abandoning you. I'm saving myself. And with that, he walked out, leaving Karen and her co-conspirators to face the consequences of their own stupidity. But Karen still wasn't done. As the community center emptied and board members fled like rats from a sinking ship, she made one last, desperate play. She pulled out her phone and started dialing. "Hello, this is Karen Whitfield," she said loudly enough for our microphones to pick up clearly. "I need to speak with Assistant Attorney General Davidson immediately." "Yes, I know it's late. Tell him it's about the Sunset Lake situation. He'll know what that means." Agent Rodriguez and I looked at each other. Davidson was definitely not on our Christmas card list, and if he was mixed up in this, our investigation had just become a whole lot more interesting. And Karen Whitfield had just guaranteed herself a front row seat to the biggest public corruption case in the state's history. Karen stood alone in the empty community center, her phone pressed to her ear with the desperation of someone making their last call from a sinking ship. Through our audio equipment, we could hear both sides of the conversation clearly. "Davidson here." The voice was crisp, professional, with an undercurrent of irritation at being called so late. "Bob, it's Karen Whitfield. We have a serious problem." A pause. Then, "Karen, I told you never to call me directly. Use the secure line." "There is no time for secure lines. The FBI is camped across the lake from my house. They have surveillance equipment, warrants, the whole 9 yards. The silence that followed stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When Davidson finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "What exactly do they know?" "Everything, Bob. Or at least, they think they do. They have warrants mentioning shell companies, construction contracts, money laundering." Agent Rodriguez was already on his laptop, pulling up everything we had on Assistant Attorney General Robert Davidson. What we found made my blood pressure spike. Davidson had been the state AG's point person on municipal corruption cases for 3 years. He'd been responsible for investigating dozens of HOA and local government fraud cases, investigations that mysteriously went nowhere despite overwhelming evidence. Cases that got buried in bureaucratic red tape or dismissed on technical grounds. Cases just like ours. "Karen," Davidson said, "I need you to listen very carefully." "How much did you tell them?" "Nothing. I didn't tell them anything. But Brad started talking about organizing documentation. And some of the homeowners started asking questions about the construction invoices." "Jesus Christ, Karen. Please tell me you didn't have this conversation where they could hear it." The pause was telling. "Karen, we had an emergency board meeting. In the community center. With federal surveillance equipment pointed at you?" "Yes, but..." "Karen, you idiot." Even through our audio filters, Davidson's shout was crystal clear. Agent Martinez actually winced and adjusted his headphones. "Bob, calm down. We can handle this. I have connections, you have connections. My connections aren't going to help if you've been recorded confessing to federal crimes." "I didn't confess to anything." But Davidson had clearly heard enough. When he spoke again, his voice was cold and professional. "Karen, as of this moment, I have no knowledge of any relationship between your HOA and this office. Any previous conversations we may have had were strictly professional consultations regarding municipal governance. Is that understood?" "Bob, you can't just abandon." "Furthermore, any documentation that might suggest otherwise should be considered privileged attorney-client communication and destroyed immediately." Agent Rodriguez looked up from his laptop. "Boss, if he's telling her to destroy evidence." I nodded. We were listening to active obstruction of justice in real time. "Bob, please." Karen's voice was getting desperate. "We've been partners for 3 years. The money we've shared, the projects we've coordinated." "I have no idea what you're talking about," Davidson cut her off. "And if you're smart, you'll forget whatever fantasy you think we've been involved in." "Fantasy? Fantasy? You've taken 20% of every major contract we've approved. Your shell company has received over $200,000 in consulting fees." The line went dead. Karen stared at her phone for a long moment, then started dialing again. This time, the call went straight to voicemail. "Bob, it's Karen again. Don't you dare hang me out to dry. I have records, Bob. I have emails, bank statements, photographs of our meetings. If I go down, you're coming with me." She ended the call and immediately started dialing a different number. Hello, Channel 7 News. This is Karen Whitfield, president of the Sunset Lake HOA. I have a story for you about federal agents harassing innocent citizens and corrupt state officials covering up their own crimes. Agent Rodriguez and I looked at each other in amazement. Karen Whitfield was about to go on the evening news and confess to everything we'd been investigating for 8 months. But her media strategy backfired even faster than her legal strategy. Ma'am, the voice on the other end said, "Can you hold, please? I'm getting another call about this same story." Karen was put on hold. Through our equipment, we could hear the tinny hold music playing. That's when my phone rang. "Agent Chun, this is Detective Captain Williams, County Sheriff's Office. We need to talk." I stepped away from our surveillance equipment. "What's up, Captain?" "We just got a very interesting call from Assistant Attorney General Davidson's office. Apparently, there's been some kind of misunderstanding about your investigation." "What kind of misunderstanding?" "The kind where Davidson is claiming your surveillance operation was never properly authorized through state channels. He's demanding we shut you down immediately and escort you out of the county." I felt my jaw clench. "Captain, we have federal warrants signed by a federal judge. State authorization isn't required." "I know that, Agent Chun. You know that. But Davidson is claiming jurisdictional issues, and he's got the mayor on speed dial. I'm getting pressure from above to make this go away." "Captain, with all due respect, this investigation involves federal crimes. State officials don't get to make it go away." "Maybe not, but they can make your life very difficult while you're in my county." I looked back toward the community center, where Karen was still on hold with the news station, probably planning to make everything infinitely worse. "Captain, what if I told you that we just recorded Assistant Attorney General Davidson instructing a subject to destroy evidence in a federal investigation?" The silence stretched for several seconds. "I'd say that changes things considerably," Williams said finally. "And what if I told you we have recordings of multiple state officials discussing their involvement in a money laundering conspiracy?" "I'd say you better have very good lawyers and very solid evidence." "We do." "Then, Agent Chun, I think it's time for you to stop hiding across the lake and start making some arrests." I looked at my team, all of whom had been listening to my side of the conversation. Agent Rodriguez was grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. "Captain," I said, "we're going to need some backup. And we're going to need it tonight." "How much backup?" I watched Karen finally get back on the line with the news station, about to make the biggest mistake of her life on live television. "All of it," I said. "We're going to need all of it." Because Karen Whitfield was about to discover that when you declare war on the FBI doesn't just fight back. We finish it. At 11:47 p.m., Karen Whitfield was live on Channel 7 News, sitting in her perfectly manicured living room, about to destroy what was left of her life on statewide television. "Thank you for joining us this late, Mrs. Whitfield," the reporter said via video link. "You claim federal agents are harassing your community?" "That's exactly right, Jennifer. These so-called FBI agents have set up surveillance equipment to spy on law-abiding citizens. They're claiming to investigate financial crimes, but this is really about government overreach and intimidation." From our cabin across the lake, we had a perfect view of Karen's house. Every light was on, and through our telephoto lenses, we could see her gesticulating wildly as she spoke to her laptop camera. "Mrs. Whitfield," the reporter continued, "what evidence do you have that this surveillance is improper?" And that's when Karen made the mistake that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "Jennifer, I've been in contact with high-ranking officials in the State Attorney General's office. Assistant Attorney General Robert Davidson personally assured me that this FBI operation lacks proper state authorization. In fact, Mr. Davidson has been working with our community for years to ensure proper oversight of our financial operations." Agent Rodriguez nearly choked on his coffee. She's actually admitting to the conspiracy on live TV. "But here's what the FBI doesn't want you to know," Karen continued, warming to her theme. "Our HOA has been incredibly successful at managing community resources. Yes, we've been creative with our funding mechanisms. Yes, we've worked with private contractors to maximize our return on investment. But every penny has gone toward improving our community." The reporter leaned forward. "Mrs. Whitfield, Are you saying your HOA has engaged in financial irregularities? I'm saying we've been smart. We've leveraged our position to negotiate better deals, secure additional funding sources, and ensure our community gets the improvements it deserves. If that's a crime, then every successful business in America is guilty. Agent Martinez was frantically checking his recording equipment. Please tell me we're getting all of this. Every word, I confirmed. She's confessing to everything on live television. But Karen wasn't done. Not even close. Furthermore, she said, staring directly into the camera, I want the people of this state to know that if federal agents can target our small community HOA, they can target anyone. Your neighborhood association, your church board, your local government. Nobody is safe from this kind of harassment. My phone buzzed with a text from Captain Williams. Units in position. Ready when you are. I looked at my team. After 8 months of careful investigation, patient surveillance, and methodical evidence gathering, it was time to end this. Mrs. Whitfield, the reporter was saying, do you have any message for the federal agents who are reportedly monitoring your community? Karen smiled directly into the camera with the confidence of someone who had no idea how badly she'd just destroyed herself. Yes, I do. Agent Shun, if you're watching, and I know you are, you picked the wrong community and you definitely picked the wrong HOA president. By tomorrow morning, this entire operation will be shut down, and you'll be explaining to your superiors why you wasted taxpayer money harassing innocent citizens. She paused dramatically. You see, Agent Shin, you made one critical mistake. You assumed we were just another small-town HOA with no connections and no resources. But we have friends in high places. Very high places. And those friends are not going to let you railroad us. I stood up and reached for my equipment bag. That's our cue. Agent Shun, Karen continued on the TV, I know you're listening. So let me be very clear. You have until sunrise to pack up your equipment and leave our community. If you're still here tomorrow morning, you're going to discover just how connected we really are. Agent Rodriguez shook his head in amazement. She's actually threatening a federal agent on live television. Mrs. Whitfield, the reporter said, those are some very serious allegations. Do you have documentation to support these claims about state officials? Karen's smile widened. Jennifer, I have 3 years' worth of emails, bank records, and meeting notes that prove Assistant Attorney General Davidson has been our partner in every major financial decision. When this FBI harassment ends, I'll be happy to share that documentation with the media. That was it. The final nail in her own coffin. I texted Captain Williams, go. Through our night vision equipment, I watched as unmarked vehicles began moving into position around the lake. Sheriff's deputies, state investigators, and federal marshals, 27 officers total, all coordinating through encrypted radio channels. Agent Shun, Karen was saying on the live broadcast, since I know you're watching, let me make you an offer. Pack up your equipment tonight. File a report saying you found no evidence of wrongdoing, and we'll forget this whole incident ever happened. She leaned closer to her camera. But if you insist on continuing this harassment, you're going to discover that some battles aren't worth fighting. And some enemies are more dangerous than you think. The reporter looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Whitfield, that sounds almost like a threat. Karen laughed. Oh no, Jennifer. That's not a threat. That's a promise. My radio crackled. All units, this is command. Target has just made terroristic threats against federal officers on live television. Move to positions. Through our cameras, I could see vehicles surrounding Karen's house, the community center, and Brad Hendrick's residence. Red and blue lights were converging from every direction, but they were still running silent. No sirens yet. Karen was still talking to the camera, completely oblivious to what was happening outside her windows. The truth is, Jennifer, these federal agents have no idea who they're dealing with. Our community has resources, connections, and legal protections they can't even imagine. Assistant Attorney General Davidson has personally assured me that this investigation will be terminated within 24 hours. Agent Rodriguez was monitoring police frequencies. Boss, they've got Davidson's house surrounded too. State police are executing a search warrant right now. I smiled grimly. While Karen had been confessing on live TV, We'd been coordinating with state investigators who were apparently just as tired of Davidson's corruption as we were. Mrs. Whitfield, the reporter was saying, I'm getting reports of police activity in your area. Can you see anything from your location? Karen turned toward her window, and I watched her face change as she saw the lights. There are police cars, she said slowly. Lots of them. Mrs. Whitfield, are you still there? Karen stood up, but her phone still streaming live video as she walked to her front window. Through our telephoto lens, I could see her face clearly. Confusion turning to fear, turning to panic. Jennifer, there are federal agents surrounding my house. The reporter's voice sharpened. Mrs. Whitfield, are you saying you're currently surrounded by law enforcement? Yes. Oh God, they're at my front door. The sound of heavy knocking echoed through both our surveillance equipment and the live TV broadcast. FBI. Search warrant. Karen spun back toward her camera, her composure completely shattered. Jennifer, they're trying to break down my door. This is exactly what I was talking about. This is harassment. The front door opened, and Agent Williams from our task force stepped into view of Karen's laptop camera. Mrs. Whitfield, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit money laundering, wire fraud, and making terroristic threats against federal officers. You can't arrest me. I'm live on television. I have rights. Yes, ma'am, you do. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you exercise it. But Karen had one more surprise for us. Instead of surrendering quietly, she grabbed her laptop and ran. Jennifer, are you still broadcasting? I need everyone to see this. I need witnesses. She was running through her house with the laptop, the camera bouncing wildly as she headed for what I assumed was a back exit. The live TV audience was getting a dizzying first-person view of a federal arrest in progress. Mrs. Whitfield, the reporter was saying, please stay calm and cooperate with law enforcement. Cooperate. They're trying to silence me because I know too much. Because I have evidence of corruption that goes all the way to the top. She burst through her back door, laptop still streaming, and ran straight into Captain Williams and 4 deputies who were waiting in her backyard. Ma'am, please put down the computer and place your hands behind your back. No, the people need to know the truth. Davidson, Morrison, all of them. They're all in on it. And that's when she made her final, fatal mistake. Still live on television, still broadcasting to thousands of viewers across the state, Karen Whitfield pulled out her phone and started reading from what appeared to be a list of names and bank account numbers. Davidson received $47,000 through Sunset Consulting, LLC. Morrison got $23,000 in legal fees for services never rendered. State Senator Phillips has been taking kickbacks through his wife's construction company. Agent Rodriguez was frantically taking notes. Boss, she's giving us a roadmap to the entire corruption network. Mayor Johnson, County Commissioner Walsh, even Judge Martinez. I have records of payments to all of them. Captain Williams finally managed to get close enough to take the laptop from her hands, but the damage was done. Karen had just confessed to bribing half the local government on live television. Mrs. Whitfield, Williams said as he cuffed her, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I know my rights, she screamed as they led her toward the police car. And I know my connections. You people have no idea what you've just started. But her connections weren't going to help her. Through our police scanner, we could hear arrest warrants being executed across 3 counties. Davidson, Morrison, 2 state senators, a county commissioner, and a sitting judge, all being arrested simultaneously based on evidence we'd been gathering for months, supplemented by Karen's own televised confessions. The reporter was still broadcasting, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just witnessed the live arrest of HOA President Karen Whitfield, who has apparently been at the center of what appears to be a massive public corruption investigation. We're getting reports of simultaneous arrests across the region. I turned off our monitoring equipment and looked at my team. 8 months of investigation concluded in one spectacular evening of self-destruction. Well, Agent Martinez said, that was easier than expected. My phone rang. It was my supervisor in Washington. Chun, Please tell me you didn't just arrest half the state government based on a HOA dispute. No, sir, I said. We arrested half the state government based on 8 months of solid investigative work. The HOA dispute was just the catalyst. And the suspect really confessed to everything on live television. Yes, sir. Along with providing us a detailed list of co-conspirators and their bank accounts. A long pause. Then, Chun, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I've never seen anything quite like this. Neither have I, sir. Good work. All of you. Now write me a report that explains how a noise complaint turned into the biggest corruption bust in state history. As I hung up, I looked across the lake toward Karen's house, now dark except for the crime scene lights. In 12 hours, she'd gone from HOA president to federal defendant, and she'd done it all to herself. But the story still wasn't quite over yet. 6 months later, I was sitting in the same cabin, but this time I was on vacation. Real vacation, not surveillance. The lake was peaceful, the community was quiet, and the Sunset Lake HOA had been dissolved by court order. Karen Whitfield was serving 18 months in federal prison after pleading guilty to conspiracy, wire fraud, and money laundering. Her televised confession had made conviction inevitable, but she'd managed to negotiate a reduced sentence by providing testimony against her co-conspirators. Assistant Attorney General Davidson got 5 years. His partnership with Karen had netted him over $200,000 in kickbacks, and his attempt to obstruct our investigation had added another year to his sentence. Attorney Morrison was disbarred and sentenced to 2 years. The fake legal advice he'd been providing to cover up the conspiracy had made him a co-conspirator rather than just an attorney. But the real surprise was how far the corruption had spread. Karen's desperate TV confession had given us leads to investigate municipal fraud in 12 counties. State Senator Phillips, County Commissioner Walsh, and Judge Martinez were all facing federal charges. The entire network that had been protecting small-scale corruption across the state was crumbling. Brad Hendricks, the treasurer who'd started the whole mess by talking about organizing documentation, had received the lightest sentence, 6 months home confinement, and full restitution. His cooperation had been invaluable in tracing the money flows and identifying other participants. The community itself was recovering nicely. Property values had actually increased once word got out that the corrupt HOA was gone. The new, democratically elected community association had hired legitimate contractors to finish the improvement projects, and residents were amazed to discover that quality work actually cost about half what they'd been paying. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Rodriguez. "Boss, turn on Channel 7 News. You're going to love this." I grabbed the remote and switched to the local news station. The same reporter who'd broadcast Karen's confession was doing a follow-up story. 6 months after the dramatic live arrest of HOA President Karen Whitfield, the Sunset Lake community is thriving under new management. Property values are up, crime is down, and residents say they finally feel like they have a voice in their community's future. The camera panned across the lake, showing the boat dock that had started our investigation. It looked exactly the same, except now it had actually cost the community $20,000 instead of $60,000. But perhaps the most interesting development, the reporter continued, is what happened to the federal agents who conducted the investigation. My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. Agent Sarah Chun and her team have received commendations from both the FBI director and the Attorney General for their work on what's being called the Sunset Lake case. Their investigation has led to the conviction of 17 public officials and the recovery of over $2 million in stolen taxpayer funds. The camera cut to file footage of me leaving the courthouse after Karen's sentencing hearing. Agent Chun declined our request for an interview, but sources close to the investigation say the case began with a simple noise complaint and ended with one of the largest public corruption prosecutions in state history. I had to smile at that. It really had started with a noise complaint. In related news, the reporter continued, the state legislature has passed new oversight requirements for HOA financial management, and Governor Walsh has signed legislation requiring all municipal contracts over $10,000 to be subject to independent audit. My phone rang. It was Captain Williams from the county sheriff's office. Agent Chen, I hope you're enjoying your vacation. I am, Captain. What's up? Well, I hate to bother you, but we've got a situation developing over in Clearwater County. Apparently, their HOA president has been charging residents for security services that don't exist, and when one of the homeowners complained, she had him arrested for trespassing on his own property. I sighed. Captain, please tell me this isn't going where I think it's going. The homeowner who got arrested? He's a retired ATF agent, and he's not taking this quietly. Of course he isn't. The thing is, Agent Chun, after what happened with Karen Whitfield, every HOA in the state knows your name. This new president, Margaret something, she's been telling people she's not afraid of the FBI because she has better connections than Karen did. I looked across the peaceful lake, then at my fishing rod sitting and used in the corner. Captain, are you asking me to cut my vacation short? I'm asking if you want to be there when Margaret discovers that having better connections doesn't help when you're committing federal crimes on camera. Despite myself, I started laughing. She's not actually doing it on camera, is she? Agent Chun, she's live streaming her HOA meetings on Facebook. Last night, she spent 20 minutes explaining to her viewers how she's been creatively financing community improvements through alternative revenue streams. I stood up and started packing my surveillance equipment. Some people never learn. Captain, send me the address. And this time, let's skip the part where we wait for them to call in a noise complaint. Copy that, Agent Chun. And Chun, thanks for making my job more interesting. As I loaded my equipment into the car, I took one last look at Sunset Lake. It was beautiful, peaceful, and completely free of corrupt HOA presidents. For now. But somewhere in Clearwater County, Margaret, whatever her name was about to discover the same lesson Karen Whitfield had learned the hard way. When you declare war on the FBI, you better make sure you're not live streaming your crimes while you do it. I started the engine and headed toward my next case, already wondering what creative financing scheme I'd be investigating this time. Because if there's one thing I've learned in 12 years of federal law enforcement, it's that there's always another Karen. There's always another corrupt HOA. And there's always another community full of people who just want to live in peace without being robbed by their own neighbors. And as long as that's true, there will always be agents like me, sitting in cabins with surveillance equipment, waiting for the next Karen to make the next big mistake. The only question is, will she do it on live television too? Tell me in the comments. Have you ever dealt with a corrupt HOA or community association? How did you handle it? Because trust me, after the Sunset Lake case, we're always listening. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of justice served cold. And remember, if you're ever tempted to commit federal crimes, maybe don't live stream it. Just a thought.